Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Eight years have passed, and I think it's finally time to tell this story. Back then, I was young, naive, and way too generous for my own good. My fiancée, Karen, had expensive tastes but no real income to match. She worked part-time at a boutique, barely 20 hours a week, and spent most of her time shopping or hanging out with friends. I didn't mind at first because I loved her, and I thought that's what you do when you're in a serious relationship, you support each other. The problem started when Karen decided she needed to move to a more upscale apartment downtown. The rent was almost double what we were paying, but she insisted it was necessary for her image. When I suggested we should stick to our budget, she threw a massive tantrum and told me the place was perfect for us and asked if I didn't want her to be happy. I tried explaining that we needed to be realistic about what we could afford, but she called me selfish and said if I really loved her, I would make it work. That should have been my first red flag, but love makes you stupid sometimes. I agreed to help with a deposit, thinking we'd figure out the rest together. Then came the job opportunity overseas, a consulting position in Australia that would double my salary. It was a dream job, and I was excited to share the news with Karen. I thought she'd be happy for us, maybe even excited about the adventure. Instead, she accused me of abandoning her and asked how I could just leave her behind. I tried to explain that I thought she could come with me and that this could be amazing for both of us, but she refused to leave her life behind for what she called my stupid career. The fight that followed was brutal. She accused me of being selfish, of never considering her feelings, and of putting money before our relationship. When I tried to explain that this was about our future together, she completely lost it. Then she told me that if I was leaving, I needed to take care of her while I was gone. When I asked what she meant, she explained that I should pay for her new apartment and send her money for living expenses. She said I owed her that much. She wanted me to pay for her lifestyle while she stayed behind, and I started over in a new country. When I refused, she went nuclear. The breakup was messy, but what came after was worse. Karen showed up at my sister's birthday party uninvited and made a scene in front of my entire family. She yelled that everyone needed to know what kind of person I really was, calling me a cheating, lying piece of garbage who abandons people when they need him most. My sister told her she needed to leave right away, but Karen kept screaming that I had promised to take care of her and that I was running away like a coward. My mom actually had to call the police to get her to leave. Some people believed her accusations, even though I had never cheated or done anything to hurt her. The harassment continued for weeks. She would show up at my workplace, follow me home, and send hundreds of text messages demanding I take out loans to support her. I had to get a restraining order just to have some peace before my move. When I finally left for Australia, I had practically nothing. I'd sold my car, most of my furniture, and anything else of value just to afford the flight and have a small emergency fund. The exchange rate was terrible. For every dollar I had saved, I could only spend about 43 cents in purchasing power. It was brutal. My first 2 weeks in Melbourne were rough. I was staying in a tiny shared apartment, sleeping on an air mattress, and living off instant noodles, oatmeal, and bananas because that's all I could afford. I was waiting for my first paycheck, which seemed like it would never come. One evening I was particularly hungry and decided to browse Uber Eats just to torture myself with pictures of food I couldn't afford. That's when I noticed something weird. There was a saved payment method I didn't recognize. When I clicked on it, I realized it was Karen's credit card information, still linked to my account from when she had ordered food months earlier. I stared at that screen for about 10 minutes, thinking about everything she had put me through. The humiliation at my sister's party, the stalking, the demands for money, the accusations of cheating. My stomach was growling, and I was so tired of being hungry. I ordered a large pizza with extra cheese, garlic bread, chicken wings, and a chocolate dessert. When the confirmation came through, I was shocked it had actually worked. The food arrived 30 minutes later, and it was the best meal I'd had in weeks. When I ate, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the breakup. satisfaction, not just from the food but from a tiny bit of justice. I told myself it was just a one-time thing, but the next night I was hungry again, and the card was still there. So I ordered Chinese food, sweet and sour pork, fried rice, spring rolls, the works. This went on for 2 weeks until I got my first paycheck. Every night I would order a feast and enjoy every bite. Pizza, Indian curry, Thai food, burgers with all the sides. I was eating like a king while Karen unknowingly funded my recovery from the financial damage she had caused. After I got paid and could afford my own food, I kept using the card for another 2 weeks. Call it petty, but I figured she owed me that much for the therapy I'd need after dealing with her crazy behavior. The card finally stopped working after a month, probably when she noticed the charges and called her bank. By then, I was settled into my new job, had made some friends, and was genuinely happy for the first time in months. I never heard from Karen again after that, which was exactly what I wanted. Most of my clients are on the West Coast, so I usually start my day around 10 a.m. and work until 7 p.m. It's perfect for me since I've never been a morning person. My girlfriend Karen, on the other hand, has a typical office job downtown and needs to be there by 9 a.m. We've been living together for about 8 months now, and for the most part, things have been great. Except for one thing that's been slowly driving me insane. Karen sets 17 alarms every single morning. 17. Starting at 6 a.m. and going off every 5 minutes until 7:20 a.m. The sound is this horrible blaring noise that could wake the dead. She hits snooze on every single one and goes right back to sleep. Meanwhile, I'm lying there wide awake from the first alarm, watching the ceiling and questioning all my life choices. I've brought this up with her multiple times over the past few months. I asked her if she could maybe set fewer alarms or use a gentler sound, explaining that I don't need to be up until 8 at the earliest. She just told me this was her system and it worked for her. She said I'd get used to it eventually. When I pointed out that I've been trying to get used to it for months and was exhausted every day because I was losing 2 hours of sleep, she simply suggested I go to bed earlier. Problem solved, according to her. The thing is, my work often runs late because I'm dealing with clients in different time zones. I can't just go to bed at 9 p.m. when I might have a client call at 10 p.m. But whenever I tried to explain this, she'd just shrug and say her job was more important because it was real work with real hours. Last week, things got worse. She started setting her alarms, even on weekends. When I asked her why she needed 17 alarms on a Saturday when neither of us had to work, she told me she needed to maintain her routine. She said successful people wake up early every day. I told her that successful people also don't torture their partners, but she just rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. It was just alarms, she said. Just alarms. 2 hours of ear-splitting noise every morning was just alarms to her. This morning was the final straw. I had worked until midnight the night before on a rush project, and I was exhausted. When that first alarm went off at 6 a.m., I felt something snap inside me. She snoozed it and rolled over with a satisfied grunt, already back asleep. 5 minutes later, another alarm. Snooze. Back to sleep. 5 minutes later, again. By 6:45 a.m., I had listened to 9 alarms. 9 opportunities for her to actually wake up and turn the stupid thing off. But no, she just kept hitting snooze like it was some kind of game. That's when I decided I'd had enough. While she was snoring softly beside me, I carefully reached over and grabbed her phone. I turned off the remaining 8 alarms, scheduled between 6:50 a.m. and 7:20 a.m. For the first time in months, I got to sleep peacefully until my own alarm went off at 8 a.m. At 8:47 a.m., I heard frantic rustling from the bedroom. She was panicking about the time and asking what happened. I was in the kitchen making coffee and I could hear her scrambling around, talking about disasters and wondering why her alarms didn't go off. She came running into the kitchen in a panic, hair everywhere, still in her pajamas. She demanded to know if I had messed with her phone. I told her I had turned off some of her alarms since she seemed to be sleeping well without them. She exploded, asking if I was insane and accusing me of sabotaging her system. She said she was going to be late for work, I pointed out that her system had been sabotaging my sleep and she still had 9 alarms go off, which should have been plenty. She explained that the early alarms were just to ease her into waking up, and the later ones were the important ones. When I asked why she didn't just set the important ones then, she insisted that wasn't how it worked. She said I had completely ruined her morning routine. She was genuinely furious, acting like I had committed some terrible crime. She told me she had any idea how important her job was. I asked if she had any idea how important my sleep was. That's when she really showed her true colors. She dismissed my work as a little hobby. That wasn't the same as a real career. She said she had real responsibilities. That's when I realized just how entitled she really was. My little hobby work paid half the rent on this apartment, but apparently that didn't matter to her. I told her she was absolutely right about her job being super important. So important, in fact, that she should probably get ready instead of standing here yelling at me. She looked at me angrily and walked off to get dressed. 20 minutes later, she came back out still looking frazzled. She told me bitterly that she was going to be at least 30 minutes late and she hoped I was happy. I told her honestly that I was happier than I'd been in months. She slammed the door on her way out. Around lunchtime, she sent me a text saying she got written up for being late and sarcastically thanking me. I texted back suggesting she set fewer alarms tomorrow and actually get up when they go off. She replied that this was all my fault. That evening, she came home in an even worse mood. She told me her boss wanted to have a meeting with her tomorrow about punctuality. Apparently, she'd been cutting it close too many times lately. When I asked how that was my fault, she insisted it was because I had messed with her system. I pointed out that her system clearly didn't work since she'd been barely making it to work on time for months. That was why she was in trouble, not because of this morning. She didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, she set 17 alarms again, but this time when I reached for her phone after the third snooze, she grabbed my wrist and told me not to dare touch her phone again. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that if she was going to torture me with 2 hours of alarms every morning, I was going to turn them off. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then I asked her a simple question. Why couldn't she just set one alarm for the time she actually needed to wake up, like a normal person? She started going on about how I didn't understand her process and how everyone was different. But I cut her off and told her I was done discussing it. Either she figured out a way to wake up without ruining my sleep, or I'd keep turning off her alarms. She called me controlling and unreasonable. She said I was trying to sabotage her career. I laughed and told her she was doing a pretty good job of that herself. The argument escalated from there. She accused me of not caring about her success. I pointed out that she clearly didn't care about my well-being or my work. She said my freelance work wasn't real work anyway. That was it. I told her that my fake work was paying for half of everything in this apartment, and if she thought so little of it, maybe she should find somewhere else to live. She went silent for a moment, probably realizing she'd pushed too far. Then she tried to backtrack, saying she didn't mean it like that. But I was done listening. I told her she had 2 choices: respect my sleep schedule or find a new place to live. Her 17-alarm system was not more important than my basic need for sleep. She tried to argue more, but I just got up and went to my office to start work. An hour later, she left for work without saying goodbye. That afternoon, I got a text from her saying she'd talked to her sister about staying there for a few days while we both cooled off. I texted back that maybe that was for the best. It's been a week now, and the apartment has been blissfully quiet in the mornings. I've been getting the best sleep I've had in months. She's texted a few times asking if we can talk, but honestly, I'm not sure what there is to discuss. I never thought 17 alarms would end the relationship, but here we are. My wife and I had just finished a nice dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. Nothing fancy, just a small Italian place we discovered when we first started dating. We were both in good spirits, laughing about old memories and planning our weekend getaway. I work as a software developer for a mid-sized tech company, and my wife is a nurse at the local hospital. We don't get many chances to go out together because of our busy schedules, so this evening was really special for us. After dinner, we decided to take a walk around the downtown area before heading home. The weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold. We had parked my silver sedan in a parking garage about 3 blocks from the restaurant. It's a pretty common car, nothing special about it, which I guess played a part in what happened next. When we were walking back to the car, my wife mentioned she was getting tired from her 12-hour shift at the hospital the night before, so I suggested we head home and watch a movie. I pulled out of the parking garage and stopped at a red light right outside. That's when this whole mess started. My wife was sitting in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone to pick a movie for later. The windows were down because it was such a nice evening and we were just chatting about what we wanted to do the next day. Suddenly, the passenger door swung open. Before either of us could react, this woman in her 40s with bleached blonde hair yanked my wife right out of the seat. I'm talking full on, grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out onto the sidewalk like she was moving furniture. My wife hit the ground hard, scraping her knee on the concrete. I was so shocked I couldn't even process what was happening. The woman climbed into the passenger seat like nothing happened and slammed the door shut. The woman started yelling at me about how long she'd been waiting for her ride. She seemed angry and impatient, like this was somehow my fault. I shouted back at her, asking what the hell she was doing and telling her that she just threw my wife out of my car. I was furious and confused at the same time. She rolled her eyes and told me not to try to scam her. She insisted that she had ordered an Uber 20 minutes ago and that I was clearly her driver. She accused my wife of trying to steal her ride, calling her crazy. I looked at this woman like she had 3 heads. She was wearing a wrinkled business suit and had this entitled smirk on her face like she owned the world. I explained to her that this was my personal car and that I wasn't an Uber driver. I told her she had just assaulted my wife and needed to get out immediately. She waved her hand dismissively and told me to save the sob story. She said she had places to be and demanded that I start driving to the address she gave me on the appy. I raised my voice and told her I didn't have any app and that this was my personal vehicle. I ordered her to get out right away. I turned around to check on my wife, who was still on the ground looking dazed and confused. Her knee was bleeding, and she had dirt all over her dress. That's when I really started getting angry. The woman huffed and said she didn't care about my personal drama. She claimed she had paid for this ride and wasn't getting out until I took her where she needed to go. She insisted that my wife was obviously trying to get a free ride by pretending to be related to me. I pointed to the receipt from dinner in the cup holder and told her we had just finished eating. I asked if she was completely insane. She shrugged and said anyone could fake a receipt. She told me it was a nice try but demanded we get moving because she was already late for her book club meeting. My wife was starting to get back on her feet and I could see she was really hurt. Not just physically, but emotionally too. She's the sweetest person I know and she would never hurt a fly. Seeing her like that made my blood boil. I threatened to call the police if she didn't get out of my car immediately. She told me to go ahead and call them. She was confident they would sort everything out and make my wife stop trying to steal rides from paying customers. That's when my wife opened the passenger door. She had collected herself and wasn't the helpless victim this crazy woman thought she was. My wife might be gentle most of the time, but she's also spent years dealing with difficult patients and has a backbone made of steel. Without saying a word, my wife delivered the most perfect punch I've ever seen. It connected right with this woman's jaw, and down she went. Out cold. I've never seen my wife throw a punch before, but apparently all those self-defense classes she took in nursing school really paid off. I asked my wife if she was okay, completely shocked by what had just happened. My wife explained that she thought the woman was trying to carjack us, and that she wasn't about to let her hurt me too. The woman was unconscious in my passenger seat, and I had no idea what to do. A few people on the sidewalk had seen what happened and were already calling the police. Within minutes, we had cop cars and an ambulance on the scene. The paramedics checked out the unconscious woman and said she'd be fine, just a mild concussion. They also looked at my wife's scraped knee and bandaged it up. The police took statements from everyone who witnessed the incident. One of the officers asked me to confirm that this woman had pulled my wife out of my personal vehicle because she thought it was her Uber ride. I told him that was exactly what happened and that she wouldn't listen when I explained this was my car. Several witnesses confirmed our story. One guy even had his phone out and recorded part of the incident. The evidence was pretty clear about who was in the wrong here. When the woman finally woke up, she was still trying to argue with the police officers. She demanded to press charges against my wife, calling her a psycho who had assaulted her for no reason. The officer explained to her that she had physically removed someone from their own vehicle and refused to leave when asked. He told her that, legally speaking, she had initiated the assault and they weren't going to arrest someone for defending their property and spouse. She screamed that this was ridiculous and demanded to speak to his supervisor. The officer told her she was free to file a complaint, but based on witness testimony and video evidence, she wouldn't have much of a case. The woman started screaming about how all the cops were corrupt and how she was going to file reports with everyone from the mayor to the FBI. She kept insisting that she was the victim in all this, even though multiple people saw her attack my wife first. The officer asked if we wanted to press charges for assault. My wife and I looked at each other. The woman was clearly unhinged, but she'd also been knocked unconscious and embarrassed in front of a crowd of people. I told the officer that I thought she had learned her lesson and that we just wanted to go home. The officers made sure the woman had a way to get home safely, and we finally got to leave the scene. My wife's knee was sore for a few days, but she was more shaken up by the whole experience than actually hurt. The apartment complex I live at is pretty well organized. Each unit comes with one designated parking space that's legally owned by the resident, just like the apartment itself. The spaces are clearly marked with unit numbers and have signs everywhere stating their private property. It's not like those confusing apartment complexes where you have to guess which spots belong to whom. I usually get home from work around 6 p.m. My routine is simple: drive into the complex, pull into my numbered space, grab my laptop bag, and head upstairs to unwind with some Netflix. It's been the same peaceful routine for months, but last Tuesday changed everything. I turned into the complex like usual, but when I drove toward my parking space, I saw something that made me angry. A shiny black BMW was parked diagonally across both my space and my neighbor's space. Not just poorly parked or slightly over the line, this car was completely blocking both spots, like the driver had done it on purpose. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. The BMW was clearly expensive, probably worth more than I make in 2 years. But what really caught my attention was something strange. The car had no license plates. Both the front and back were completely bare. My first thought was maybe it belonged to a new resident who didn't know the parking rules yet. Even though that didn't explain the missing plates, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I decided to check with my neighbor first. I knocked on his door and he answered, still wearing his work clothes. I asked him if he knew anything about the BMW in the parking lot. He looked confused and asked what BMW I was talking about. I explained there was a black one parked across both our spaces with no license plates. He told me it definitely wasn't his since he drove an old Honda, and he didn't know anyone with a BMW either. I thanked him and said I should probably call someone about it. He agreed, saying it was pretty bold to park in private spaces like that. I went back outside to take another look at the situation. The more I stared at that BMW, the more irritated I became. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately removed their license plates and parked in a way that blocked two residents from using their own property. The nerve of it was incredible. These parking spaces weren't just assigned, we actually owned them. It's like someone deciding to set up a tent in your backyard because they felt like it. That's when I noticed something the owner probably didn't think about. In our country, vehicles have inspection stickers that display the license plate number right on the windshield. Even though this person was clever enough to remove the physical plates, they forgot about that little detail. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency number. I told them I needed to report a vehicle illegally parked in private parking spaces at my apartment complex. The officer asked for the license plate number. I explained that the plates had been removed, but I could see the number on the inspection sticker. I read off the number from the windshield sticker, and the officer said, they would look into it and contact the owner. Someone would be there within the hour. While I waited, I had to park on the street outside the complex. It was annoying, but I figured it would be worth it to teach this entitled person a lesson. I went upstairs to my apartment and kept checking out the window every few minutes to see if anything was happening. About 15 minutes later, I saw a police car pull into the complex. Right behind it was another car, looked like someone rushing to get there. I grabbed my keys and headed back downstairs to watch the show. When I got to the parking area, I saw a middle-aged guy in an expensive suit practically running toward the BMW. He looked panicked and kept checking his phone. The police officer was already standing next to the car, writing something on his notepad. The BMW owner started talking rapidly to the officer. I couldn't hear everything, but I could tell he was trying to make excuses. He was gesturing wildly and pointing at his car like it was somehow the victim in this situation. The officer remained calm and professional, but wasn't buying any of the guy's explanations. From what I could piece together, the man was trying to claim he had only been there for a few minutes and didn't realize these were private spaces. But the officer pointed to all the signs clearly marking the area as private property. The man's voice got higher and more desperate when he realized his excuses weren't working. Then the officer started writing what looked like a ticket. The BMW owner got really angry and started arguing more loudly. He demanded to know who had called the police and kept insisting this was all a misunderstanding. The officer told him that removing license plates to avoid identification was illegal and parking in private property was trespassing. I walked over to join the conversation since it was my parking space after all. When I introduced myself as one of the affected residents, the BMW owner turned his anger toward me. He started yelling about how I should have just asked him to move instead of calling the police. I told him that he had removed his plate specifically to avoid being contacted, so how exactly was I supposed to find him? That seemed to shut him up for a moment. The officer finished writing the ticket and handed it to the man. I saw his face go pale when he looked at the amount. The officer told him the fine was 450 euros for the license plate violation and illegal parking on private property. 450 euros. I smiled a little. The BMW owner looked like he was about to cry. He kept staring at the ticket and muttering about how unfair it was. The officer warned him that if he was caught doing this again, the fine would be even higher and his car could be towed. The man finally got into his BMW and started it up. When he was backing out, he rolled down his window and looked at me with anger. He said something about how I was petty for calling the police instead of handling it like an adult. I just shrugged and told him that adults don't remove their license plates and steal other people's parking spaces. He drove off in a huff, probably going to find some other place to illegally park. The officer came over to me and said I had done the right thing by calling it in. He mentioned that they'd been getting more complaints about people removing plates to avoid parking violations, and they were cracking down on it. After the officer left, my neighbor came outside. He had watched the whole thing from his window and was grinning from ear to ear. He said it was the most entertainment he'd had all week. We both agreed that the guy got exactly what he deserved. I finally got to park in my own space again. My boss makes every single day a living hell. They would micromanage everything I did, from how I organized my desk to the exact wording of emails. Nothing was ever good enough. When I submitted a report, they would call it garbage and tell me to redo the whole thing. When I asked what specifically needed to be changed, they would just say everything and tell me to use my brain for once. This became our typical interaction. They never gave constructive feedback, just criticism designed to make me feel stupid. They'd talk to me like I was a child who couldn't tie their own shoes. Despite this, I stuck around because I needed the paycheck. My rent wasn't going to pay itself, and jobs in my field were scarce. Over 6 years, I watched them treat employee after employee like dirt until they quit. I became one of the most senior staff members simply by surviving the longest. The extra work kept piling up without extra pay. They would make me stay late to fix presentations that I had already finished and they had already approved. When I pointed out that I had completed the work yesterday and gotten approval, they would say they changed their mind and the client meeting was tomorrow. Every time I questioned their decisions, They told me to just do it and stop questioning everything they said. The manipulation was constant. They'd pile on extra responsibilities without extra pay, then act like I should be grateful for the learning opportunity. When I bring up my increased workload during performance reviews, they'd guilt trip me about my attitude. They would say they were disappointed in me and that after everything they had done for me, giving me chances to grow, this was how I repaid them. When I asked for fair compensation, they told me I was lucky to have a job in this economy and that plenty of people would kill for my position. The breaking point came during a busy month when I was running 3 different client accounts while they took a 2-week vacation. When they returned, instead of thanking me for keeping everything running smoothly, they found fault with every decision I'd made. They demanded to know why I approved the Miller campaign without checking with them first. I explained that they were unreachable and the client needed an immediate answer to meet their deadline. They said that wasn't an excuse and that I had overstepped my authority. I pointed out that the campaign was successful, the client loved it, and wanted to extend their contract. They said that wasn't the point and that I didn't make executive decisions without their approval. I realized then that no matter what I did, it would never be good enough. They wanted a scapegoat, not an employee. After 6 years of this treatment, my mental health was shot. I was having anxiety attacks every Sunday night just thinking about Monday morning. The final straw came when they blamed me for losing a client that left because of their own terrible behavior during a meeting. I wasn't even present, but somehow it was my fault for not preparing them better for the client's concerns. That weekend, I updated my resume and started job hunting seriously. Within a month, I had an offer from a much better company with a boss who actually treated employees like human beings. When I gave my 2 weeks notice, my boss told me I was making a huge mistake and said good luck finding another job that paid as well. I mentioned that my new position actually paid 30% more. They said not to expect a reference when that didn't work out. I told them I wouldn't dream of asking for one. During my final 2 weeks, they made my life as miserable as possible. They'd assign me pointless busy work, then complain when I didn't finish important projects they'd never mentioned before. They were clearly trying to make me quit early or give them a reason to fire me, but I stuck it out. On my last day, they had an emergency meeting that kept them out of the office all day. This gave me the perfect opportunity to execute my plan. I'd spent considerable time picking out the perfect goodbye card. It wasn't just any card. It was the glitteriest monstrosity I could find. The front was covered in ultra-fine sand-like glitter that seemed to multiply when you breathed on it. The inside had even more glitter, somehow embedded in the paper fibers. Just opening the card released clouds of sparkly dust. I wrote what appeared to be a heartfelt thank you message, thanking them for all the incredible learning opportunities over the past 6 years. I mentioned that their unique management style had taught me so much about leadership and how to treat people. I wrote that I would never forget my time there or the lessons they had taught me, and that the experience had been truly unforgettable. I signed it with deepest gratitude and best wishes for the future. Every word was technically true, just not in the way they'd interpret it. I placed the card on their desk, right where they'd see it first thing. Then I said goodbye to my colleagues, who I genuinely cared about. They were all great people stuck in the same terrible situation I'd finally escaped. One of them said they would really miss me and that the place wouldn't be the same. I told them they would be fine and reminded them to remember what they were worth and not let anyone convince them otherwise. When I walked out for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of constant stress and anxiety was finally lifting from my shoulders. A former colleague who still worked there kept me updated on the aftermath. When my boss opened that card, glitter exploded everywhere. It covered their desk, their chair, their clothes, and somehow worked its way into every crevice of their office. They tried vacuuming, wiping, even hiring a cleaning service, but the glitter kept appearing. 2 years later, they're still finding traces of it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.